Okay, we got the top of the hour. We're going to be starting out in just a minute or so. Just like to welcome everyone back to the third day of our course. Hope everyone's doing well. Make sure if you have questions as we're going along that you figure out how to type your questions into the Q&A panel or go to webinar meeting. I'd be happy to try to answer those in real time. If not, I'll make sure I answer all the questions by the time we get to the end. I'm going to give just another 60 seconds or so because we find that lots of people log in the first 2 minutes. Maybe while we're waiting, I'm going to move over to the GitHub repository that I showed you on day one, back on Tuesday. So if you go to github.com/criticalpathtraining, you see a whole bunch of repositories that we've created for our classes at Critical Path Training. And so if we go to the Power BI Party Pack, I've added a couple things since day one. So notice that you have the lab file that is inside there. If you want to download and do that lab, we also have the slides here now. So Intro to Power BI slides, both in XPS and PDF format. One of the nice things about GitHub is that if I just click on the PDF file, it actually knows how to render those over on the server. You can actually download the PDF file and look at it in a local viewer. But just to give you a quick idea of what you're going to get inside of this, so basically, we have the slides for the entire course. If I go here through just a little bit further, just to get the visual gratification of being able to see some of those alpacas again. Okay. But basically, we have all the slides. They're all available to you inside there. Okay, let's go ahead and start up today. So what we're going to look at, first of all, is just another call out to our hands-on training course. We have a Critical Path Training. Once again, we have a London delivery in February, a Tampa delivery in March. You can come to our website, kind of see the detail of the course. Okay, now let's get into the program at hand. So we have a 3-day course, 1 hour a day, and on day one, we had the introduction to the Power BI service. So we looked at what is Power BI, as a platform, and then how can I use the browser to basically import data sets, build reports, build dashboards, and we also took a look at real-time dashboards and the potential they have. Yesterday was data modeling and query day. So we looked at using Power BI Desktop and the different things that we can do with it. And so today, we're going to continue on and look at designing and deploying reports and dashboards. Now, we're going to start by covering a little bit more of the DAX topic that we covered yesterday. And what you're going to find is that when you're creating a data model, you're going to create measures, you're going to write DAX expressions. But often, it's not till you start creating reports and you start adding visuals that you realize you need a new measure, or you realize that the current measure you have needs to be updated to accommodate some aspect of the report. So that's the first thing we'll look at. Then we'll look at creating dashboards, tiles, and then we'll look at the different mechanisms to deploy dashboards, which includes dashboard sharing and using organizational content packs. At the very end, we'll discuss how to basically access your dashboards and your reports through mobile devices like iPhones, Androids, and Windows 10 phones. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Now, yesterday, we spent a good deal of time inside of Power BI Desktop. And we kind of saw that you have a data model that you're creating from data you've imported with Power Query, and then we use the different aspects of Power Pivot to basically begin adding measures, adding other things, such as calculated columns into our particular view, and now we started working with reporting. Okay, now the content I wanted to look at in this section has to do with writing DAX expressions and how the evaluation context works for a DAX expression. So it's important to realize that we have row context and filter context. Row context is a little bit easier to work out because the row context is just the context of the current row as a DAX expression iterates through a particular table. So a good example would be if I go back and we take a look at something, such as customer, and we have age. Well, age is something that can be calculated just by looking at one other column in the same row. So this can be evaluated with row context, but doesn't have any filter context. Same thing with age group. And what's important to remember about calculated columns is they don't see any filter context because they're not evaluated at query time. They're evaluated at load time, and the only thing they can see is other things, inside of their particular row. Okay, now the second thing we want to look at is filter context. And filter context at first doesn't seem tricky, but the more you look into it, the deeper it gets. Now, here's an example. Let's say that we've created a matrix, and inside of our matrix, we've added row columns, which is the month and the year, and then we've added column labels, which is the year. So every single value that you see, has a filter on it for the year column and for the month in year column. So you can see that that's a very simple example of filter context. But what would happen, let's look at the bottom example, if someone put some slicers on a report and the user now picked Western region and picked repeat customer. Well, all of a sudden you have this issue, and the issue is that they reevaluate those measures again, this time adding 2 more column filters. Okay, now column filters, column filters can be added just by the visual itself, by just being at a particular cell in a column and row combination. We have also slicers, but also realize if I go back and take a look at a particular report, and I then look at a visual, every visual has the opportunity for you to add filters to that particular visual. And then also, in addition to filter or visual level filters, we also can add a page filter. So imagine you have 3 or 4 different pages, one for each particular year. So each page could have a year filter, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015. And then what's really neat is you create a report for 2012, and you can just copy and paste the visuals from one page to another, and then change the page filter to 2013. And then there's also a top-level report filter. So there's lots of different filters that can be put in place. Okay, now with that information, let's go ahead and look at a couple different things. Well, first of all, let's look at how we can use time intelligence functions. Now, remember that if you're going to use time intelligence, one thing that you're going to need is inside of your data model, you're going to need 1 or more tables that plays the role of a date table, or what some people will call a calendar table. And we also saw yesterday that you can create those by creating a new dynamic table inside of Power BI Desktop, and then you can add the different calculated columns to break out a particular date by its year, its quarter, its month, the month and year, day and week, things like that. Okay, now once you've done that, well, let's say that now I want to go ahead and get some totals. So notice that there is a built-in function in DAX, which is total QTD for quarter to date, and another function, total YTD, for year to date. That's great. Now let's say that I want something a little bit different. I want a running total that starts on the first day my company did business up to a current period of time. It turns out there is no convenience function, so then we have to start using the calculate function of DAX. The more you decide to embrace DAX and that you want to get really good at writing reports and really crunching numbers, the more you're going to have to come to terms with learning how to use calculate. It is by far the most powerful and the most commonly used function in the DAX language when we start creating reports that get beyond just a trivial level of the sales amount to give me sales revenue. Now, in this particular DAX expression, we're using calculate, and one of the great things about the calculate function is you have an expression, let's sum up the sales amount from the sales table, but when you use calculate, the second expression is a table, and if you want to totally ignore the current filter context, you can do that. If you want to ignore some aspects, but not all aspects, for instance, if the filter context has 2 or 3 different columns and you want to ignore the filter from one column but honor the 2 other ones, we're going to be able to do that. So here is a technique where the second argument we pass to calculate is filter. So when I call filter, I pass it a table, and I'm going to say, give me all the dates in the calendar. Oh, but now let's do a filter and only give me the dates that go up to whatever the current date in the context filter is. And ultimately what that's going to do for us is give us the ability to create visuals like you see in front of you. We have sales revenue, and maybe over on the sales revenue quarter to date, you can kind of see that it goes up until the 4th quarter, and then it starts again. And year to date, it goes up until the end of the year, then it starts again. But we have the sales revenue running total that will just keep going up and up and up. So here we're kind of looking at the filter context just to get the final date, but we want to go all the way back to the beginning and get that first date inside there. Okay, let's just look at a couple more examples of working with filter context. Look at this example that I showed yesterday. So I want to create sales growth for the previous month. So what we can do is we can create a DAX expression that first of all sums up, and if I say sum sales amount, that gives me basically the sales for the current filter expression, and we're kind of assuming that the current filter expression is going to be something that is only a month at a time. And then under calculate, we're going to say then sum, and DAX has a previous month expression, and that allows me to go back and grab the previous month and subtract that from this month's total, and then we'll divide through by the previous month. That all works great. Okay, now what's the problem? The problem is, what would happen if you put that on a visual, and that visual then has a particular cell that's going to show that not evaluated at the month level, but evaluated at the quarter level? When we wrote this DAX expression, we made the assumption that, or maybe implicitly, maybe I didn't think it through, that it was only going to be used when we have a context filter, which is filtering at the month level. And you can see that when the context filter filters at the quarter level, all of a sudden this function or this DAX expression breaks down and shows just a large erroneous result that has no meaning but scares the heck out of my users. So what we're going to do is we're going to start adding some extra things inside there. So here we're going to add a if expression, and then we're going to basically say if it is filtered at the month level, so make sure it's filtered at the month level, and if it's filtered at the month level, it could also be filtered at the day level. So you want to make sure that there's nothing smaller. But what this gives me the ability to do is, instead of having a large erroneous value that we add inside there, if my particular expression sees that it's evaluated in a context that doesn't make sense, it just returns a blank cell. Okay, now one thing to think about. If you're the one who is creating the data model and you're the only one creating reports, you could probably not worry about this and have the discipline to only use that measure in visuals when you know it's only being filtered at the month level. But think about a scenario where you are creating a data model and other users are going to be creating reports. You basically set a landmine here for people to, use it, and all of a sudden not realizing that the filtering is happening, not at the month level, but the quarter or year level. So writing this type of defensive DAX, gets to be a very important part of really understanding, how to use Power BI Desktop, Power Pivot, and Power BI in general. Let's look at a couple more examples. Here is an example when I want to look at a percentage of product sales. Let me go back over and take a quick look here at the product revenue breakdown. So you can see here that we have all these different products, and I want to see for each individual product, what percentage of all products that's bringing inside there. And then maybe I want to see for, percentage of product category, how that's working. Now here you can kind of see that we have some kind of an issue right here where it's showing me 100 for everything. So that doesn't look right. Okay, now if we go back and we take a look at some of these, let's go back under products, and now if we look at percentage of all products, well, it's calculating, it's giving me a sum, and when it says all, it basically says, okay, let's filter out everything except for, and now when you add not just the table name, but you add the column, it basically says we don't want this included in the filtering inside there. Now I look at product subcategory, and that's just filtering on product right here. Let's look at product category, and as I look at product category, we're seeing that that's giving me some weird thing. It's not doing it what it should. So if I come back here and we decide to also look at product right here, and now we go back and we take a look at the particular report, you can see all of a sudden it got fixed. But if you did not remove the filter on product, it would then just look at the product relative to the product, which would always be 100%. So once again, kind of knowing what filters to remove, which ones to include, gets to be the trick of getting really good at using this language. Okay, let's look at one more example here. Here's a great one, product rank. So if I want to list the top selling products or the customers that had the greatest amount of sales revenue, DAX gives me this special rank X function. And when I call rank X, let's say we start with this right here, and we'll say all products and calculate some sales amount. And so what that allows me to do is to basically get a product ranking, and when I say calculate some sales amount, it's going to figure out what the sales revenue is for each product, and the products with the greatest ones get the highest ranks. Note that when you use rank X, let's say that the 5th and 6th one had the same amount, what you'll find is that both of those will be assigned a rank of 5, and the next one will be a rank of 7. Okay, now let's see where there's a problem. So here, let's say that we now have this particular page, and let's go kind of look at our top customers right here, and that's using the DAX expression that you saw on the slide. Okay, so now we go down here and we start looking at things, and now we want to look at the product rank per year. That's working great. I want to look at the product rank for something else, such as age group for the customers. That's working great. But now what's going to happen when I have a slicer and I start looking at the category which is part of the product? Now note that we have products 1 through 5. I click on action figures, and all of a sudden it says 1 and 3. I click on remote controls, and it says 2, 4, and 5. I click on arts and crafts, and it's got nothing. So the issue that I have here is when I add this filter, it doesn't rerun the ranking and just give me the ranks for products within this particular category. The ranking function's working the exact same way, as it was before. Okay, so what I find is that to fix this particular problem, we now have to go in and basically, when I do ranking, to basically say don't filter on these particular items inside there. Okay, so once again, let's go back here, and we kind of see at this point things are broken inside here. And now we go back to product rank, and that's because I'm just looking at products. And so now if we decide to do it on subcategory, and we decide to do it on the product as well, let's go ahead and move back here. And what we should see now is that these filters up top worked before, but now when we start looking at a particular group inside there, we're basically having the filtering run one more time, and now just look at products inside of this particular category when you rank 1 through 5. Okay, so once again, just getting better at using DAX. And if you're just writing the data model and you're not creating reports and visuals, it's not going to be as apparent, what you're missing. You really have to start adding things to the report and verifying that things are correct before you're going to realize that you have some issues and you're going to have to start, working at this level. Okay, so now that we've seen that, let's go ahead and move on to our next topic. So the next topic we're going to look at is creating and designing dashboards. Now, dashboards are something that represent the entry point for the dashboard consumer. I'm assuming that most of the people who have come to this training course basically have an interest in getting good at Power BI, and that you plan to be an author of a solution as opposed to just being a consumer. But when you have a consumer, we want the consumer to be able to easily get into the dashboard and not have a lot of technical details that they have to go through. So you're going to create data sets, you're going to create reports, but then when you create the dashboard, you're trying to think of ways to create a consolidated view so that users can get to exactly what they need to see in the dashboard, and possibly to drill down into a report if they need more detail or they need to work with interaction. The other key thing about dashboards, let me go back here and look at one of the dashboards that we've been working with, is that dashboards, unlike reports, have this user interface experience when you're creating them and when you're looking at them that are very much tailored to work well on mobile devices with a responsive design. So you're going to find there's a lot more work where things snap to a particular grid system, in dashboards, where they don't necessarily do that, at least today, inside of reports. Okay. Now, think of this. The dashboard represents a unit of deployment and reuse. And if you're going to create one dashboard that does everything, well, you better hope that within that dashboard, you don't have certain things that should only be seen by some users, and then you have other things that should be seen by other users. When you create a dashboard and the report or reports behind the dashboard, think of that as an atomic unit that you are configuring permissions for and you're granting access to. So one of the problems is that if you create a report that has 10 different pages, and then you start thinking, well, I want a certain audience to see pages 1 through 3 and another audience to see page 4, you've already gone down the wrong road. You want individual reports, because the idea that someone is going to get to a dashboard, someone is then going to click on an item, get to the report, and they're going to be able to see every single page inside of that report behind there. So your reports, you might consider making them narrow in scope to make sure that each report, is designed for a particular audience, and then you might have a one-to-one correspondence between a dashboard and a report. It's not necessary. You could also have 2 reports and have a single dashboard getting inside there if that's easier for your audience. But just kind of keep in mind that the dashboard and the reports behind it, really represent a security boundary to the users who are going to be using it. Now, as we go through the next half hour of the session, you're also going to see the 2 different ways to deploy a dashboard, one by dashboard sharing, the other one by using what are called organizational content packs. Okay, now when it's time to create a dashboard, fairly easy to do, and that is I can come to the dashboard section, click plus right here, and I can create a dashboard. And once I've created the dashboard, it's not associated with any report or data set yet, so I could add things inside there. What you might find is an easier technique is, let's go to the report that I created with Power BI Desktop, and maybe we'll go to this one particular page and we're going to go ahead and pin some things. One other thing to note is that when you pin things and when you create content packs, make sure that if you have slicers, they're in what you want to be the initial state, which in this case, I don't want anything selected here. But what you'll find is if you select something right here, just because you were testing, and then you create a content pack, well, that selection is going to be inside there. So just kind of make sure that things are in their initial state. Now let's go ahead and take this particular product ranking, and let's go ahead and create a new dashboard, and I'll call this one sales performance. And once I've created this particular dashboard, I've added one visual. We'll go ahead and we'll add a visual inside there. Let's go ahead and take a look at what our dashboard looks like. So there's our dashboard. Note that sometimes I can make things smaller. Sometimes I want to make things bigger inside there. Okay, but now I'm going to start moving around and working with this. Now, when I have a dashboard, you also have the option of adding what's called the Q&A search box. Now, with the particular Q&A search box, there is a search engine which uses what's called the natural language query. And the idea is if I want to see sales revenue by year, or I want to see sales revenue by city, and sales revenue by city in Florida. What you're going to see is that they're able to take what you have there and translate that, into a query that they can run. And when they bring back the data, well, they're going to use some visual, and they have some algorithm, given the data that comes back, how to show that. If I run a natural language search, I get back a result, and I don't like the visual, certainly I could go back over to visuals, and it's just like I'm working in the report designer, and I could say, let's go ahead and change that right there. Let's go ahead and change some other characteristics about this. Do we want detail labels, yes or no? Do I want to put a tile? Do we want to put a legend in place right here? And then also, once you've created this particular visual, just with a Q&A search result, I could also take that and I could pin that to my dashboard as well. So now we go back and we look at our dashboard, and these first two tiles are from a report. This other one is basically just created on the underlying data set that was just kind of generated out of a search result inside there. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the Q&A search box. Sometimes you want to have it inside there, sometimes you won't. I think to some degree, this language is going to be a lot like voice recognition, in that it's a technology that gets better over time and it's kind of new. And you might be able to work with this fine. I'm sure over the next year, at least one technical professional will be fired because they gave their boss this text box and the boss couldn't use it and got so frustrated they just fired the guy. Okay, so you have to make a decision whether you want to use it or not. Now, other things that you can do is if I go to this dashboard and I choose settings, and then we go to data sets, note that for a particular data set, if you like the Q&A feature, instead of making your users type things in from scratch, you can actually seed it by typing in questions, sales revenue by state, things like that, which kind of lead people down this road of kind of typing things in. Okay. You also might decide that you don't want the Q&A search box on your dashboard, and so note that each dashboard gives you this option to basically remove the Q&A search box, and now it's gone. You could add it, create a bunch of visuals, pin them, and then get rid of it. Okay, so once again, the Q&A dashboard is there if you want it, and if you think it's distracting, you can go ahead and remove it from a particular dashboard. Now, another thing that we can do is modify tile details. When you have a visual on a report that has a title, if I go and look at one of these, notice that the title came across, but maybe it's not the title that I want. So if I go and click on the pencil right here and get the title details, well, now I can say top 5 products. I can put some type of a subtitle inside there. But the idea is that you make these very intuitive so your users can see them. Also, if you wanted to add a custom link, so when they clicked on the tile, you went to any particular URL on the internet, you can add that in as well. You can also put the last refresh time You know, if it's some particular piece of data and the user wants to see if it's a minute old, an hour old, or 2 weeks old. Okay, let's go ahead, choose that. Let's keep going. And now that we've seen how to create a dashboard, we're going to look at the two different ways that we can deploy the dashboard. So the first thing we'll look at is sharing dashboards. And that gives you kind of a quick and easy way to create a dashboard and then to make it available to other users. After that, we'll compare that to deploying it through using an organizational content pack. Okay, now remember there are two types of workspaces that we have. We have personal workspaces, and if I go back here to the Power BI service, note that everybody has a My Workspace, which is their personal workspace. You also might be in one or more group workspaces as well. Now, if I wanted to create a new group workspace, we can go ahead and create one of these inside there. Now, remember behind the scenes that this is going to create an Office 365 unified group. And you can make it so that it's public and anyone can see the group is there, and the default is to allow people to opt into the group. So if there's information and anyone can see it and you're trying to promote adoption, that's certainly a good way to do it. Also, you can make a group private, and then you can basically decide what members are allowed to go inside. Okay, for instance, I have this one particular user, which is boss man at my company. I'm going to go ahead and add this particular user. And when you add group members, you can basically add them as either contributors, read-write access, or read-only access inside there. We'll go ahead and save. Remember that when you create the group workspace, you're creating an Office 365 unified group. So now that is an email address. That is a group that you can use to configure permissions to anything in the Office 365 environment. Also, that group workspace, just to take a quick tangent here, let's say that I now go to my mailbox inside here, and one of the neat things about working with Office 365 groups inside there is, we can see these particular groups. The group that I just created would show up in a few minutes, but if I go to one of these groups right here, every single group has its own OneDrive. Groups have things like conversations inside here. So the unified group goes way beyond Power BI as far as, creating an infrastructure for collaboration, sharing, and securing, things like Power BI dashboards. Okay, so with that background, let's say that I want to deploy a dashboard and the report and data set behind it from my personal workspace. So I created one or more reports and data sets, probably using Power BI Desktop. Next, using the browser, I create a dashboard and I pin the tiles to it. And now I'm going to share the dashboard with one or more other users. And what you're going to see is then within their personal workspace, the dashboard is automatically going to show up. Okay. Also, what we're going to see is that there's dashboard. The dashboard sharing process involves sending out an invitation to these users, which is going to be done in the form of an email that has an announcement that the dashboard has been shared with them. And then there's also a link they can click to accept the invitation. So if you invite 10 different users, a week later you can look to see which users have actually accepted the invitation. Okay, now let's go ahead and work through an example. So let's say that I have this particular dashboard and I'd like to share this with another user. So down here I can either go to share, or I can use the share button up here at the far right. Let's go ahead and click on share, and it brings me to the share dashboard page. Who do I want to invite? So I'm going to go ahead and invite my boss, and we'll go ahead and put some type of a message inside here. And once again, these are going to be added into a email invitation message that gets sent to this particular user. Allow recipient to share the dashboard. So here's one of those things where if everyone can see this data and I'm trying to promote adoption, if I send it to you and you like it, you can share it with someone else. Or I can make it so that when I share it with you, you have no permission to share it with someone else. Okay, let's go ahead and choose this. Let's go ahead and click OK inside here. And so now we have shared the dashboard with this other user. Okay, now once you have gone through this process of sharing the dashboard with another user, the other user should be able to see it. Okay, now while you're doing your work, it's nice for you to be able to test the dashboard as another user. This is one of the main reasons that I recommend that you create an Office 365 trial tenant, because then you're not using your production tenant. You can create other Office 365 unified groups, you can create test users, and you can do all your testing without having to go over to someone else's desk and say, can you look at my dashboard? Okay, now back here inside of the demo, let me go back down, and here I have a trial Office 365 tenant. And so if I go to admin, what we're going to see is if I go under users and we look at users, well, let's look at my user account. So if I look at my particular user account and then we look at the licenses that have been assigned, what we're going to see is that I have a Power BI Pro license. Okay, that's great. But now I can add other users. So I've added Bossman inside here. And note that given the type of tenant you have, you might be able to add extra users and assign them Office 365 E3 licenses. There's one trial tenancy that you can create where you have 30 days to create 30 trial users. But if you have an MSDN account, you can create one user and you only have one Office license. You'd have to basically buy more Office licenses. What's nice is that currently Power BI has a free version, which means you don't need any other licenses. You can just add users and assign them one of these particular licenses inside there. Okay, so given that, let's now go ahead and test this from the perspective of a user who I've shared my dashboard with. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to sign out with my Ted Pattison account, and I'm going to sign back in with this other account. And now when I get back in with this other account right here, and did I do this correctly? Yep. So what you can see here is that I have shared the dashboard with this other user, and the other user can now see it. But also note that the user can see the dashboard, but the user in the navigation pane does not see the report nor the data set that it's based on. And once again, this is mainly to reduce the noise for this consumer. Does the consumer really care that we have dashboards and reports and data sets if it's just a consumer? No, the idea is that this user sees the dashboard. If the user now clicks on something, that user now can drill down into the reports, but they can only get to the reports by going through that. Note that this other user now can take the dashboard and can start, looking at various, aspects of it with inside there. So the user sees the report, they just don't see the report in the navigation pane inside there. And let me once again reiterate that, if you have provided a whole bunch of reports inside there, if you let the user see the dashboard and get to the report, they can get to any page inside that report. So you don't really configure security inside, of a dashboard and its reports. You configure kind of the entry into the dashboard as your security boundary and make sure that it doesn't, provide access to things in the reports that you don't want a certain audience to have access to. Okay, so now that we've seen that, let's go ahead and log out as our test user, log back in with my account right here. And now that we've looked at sharing dashboards, the next topic we're going to look at is working with content packs. Okay, now what is a content pack? A content pack is a packaging mechanism for you to take a dashboard and the report and data set, or the reports and data sets behind a dashboard, and make them available in another workspace. So you need one workspace to actually create the dashboard with its reports and its data sets. And that can either be a personal workspace or it could be a group workspace. And then you're going to create the content pack, which then lives within the context of that workspace. And then you can make it so users in other workspaces can activate your content pack. Okay, sounds good so far. Let's go ahead and see this inside here. So let's go back, and right here I've created this sales performance dashboard. Okay, now let's say that one of my goals would be to go to this other group workspace, wingtip management, and to be able to have many different users experience the same dashboard that I've created inside there. Okay, so let's go back to my personal workspace. And so if I drop down the settings, I can choose Create Content Pack. Now when I create the content pack, this is going to be Sales Performance, probably going to make it the same name as, actually, that's not what I wanted to put inside there. That is going to be the title. What I glossed over that now I'll talk about is when you create a content pack, you can make it available to the entire organization, or you can make it available only to specific group workspaces. And you would add the email address of the group workspace inside there. I'll make this one available to the entire organization. Okay, and now we'll go ahead and we'll add in some particular description right here. Now, when you create a content pack, you could upload an image. I'm not going to do that inside this demo, but when someone looks at the content pack and decides whether to import it or not, they'll see your custom image. Now, the most important thing is you get to select, which particular dashboards, reports, and data sets that are going to be in this content pack. So let's pick on sales performance. And note that when you pick a dashboard, it automatically selects the reports and data sets that is based on. I cannot unselect that. If I pick that dashboard, you have to include the reports and data sets behind it. Okay, now let's go ahead and click on Publish. So I'll go ahead and click on Publish. After I click on Publish, I can come back later and see what are the content packs that we have created inside of this workspace. So if I say View, and there is my one and only content pack that I've created so far, if I click on Edit, well, maybe I could change groups, add a new group inside here, switch from my organization to groups or vice versa, add another dashboard. Let's go ahead and make a change. Now, I haven't imported the content pack yet, but one of the things I want you to see is if we have this particular dashboard, and now let's go to a report, and let's take something new here, and let's go ahead and add that, into that particular dashboard. Okay, now we've done something new. You've made changes to a published content pack. You'll need to update it. So if you applied the content pack now, before I updated it, you wouldn't get that extra tile. However, now if we go to View Content Pack and we go to Edit, well, I can now update the content pack, click this inside here, and then all of a sudden it has been updated inside. Okay, now we've seen how to create the content pack. Let's see how to use the content pack. So to do that, we're going to have to go to a different workspace. So let's go to that group workspace, which is Wingtip Management. And note that at this point, there's nothing inside there. So if I go to Content Pack Library under my organization, you're going to see the content packs that I've made available to either this group or the entire organization. When someone clicks on that particular content pack, it will give them the ability to connect or import the content pack. And then all of a sudden, there's my dashboard. People can start working with this inside here. Note a big difference between using content packs and sharing dashboards, and that is if I share a dashboard in the browser, you see the dashboard, but you don't see the reports and data sets in the navigation pane. If we use organizational content packs, you can see the reports, you can see the data sets, which means that you could go and create additional reports on that data set. Or you could open up that report and make modifications to it. So that gets to be a pretty big difference between the two. Now, once we've done that, let's go back here to my personal workspace. And let's say that we want to now add something else inside there. So let's go ahead and just add one more thing inside. View content packs, kind of give me some messages saying, hey, you made some changes to this right here. Do you want to go ahead and update those particular changes right there? And so now if I go back and we take a look at this over here, you can see that as I update my content pack where I created it, I can push the changes out to other places that are using that content pack inside. Okay, so once again, you can kind of see how we're able to get the content packs as a mechanism for distributing our dashboards. One thing that everyone's asking for is how we can use content packs and have the file on my machine so I can create the content pack and upload it. And so Microsoft hasn't got to that stage yet. So everything about content packs is kind of a black box inside the Power BI environment right now. What we expect is that they're going to give us more reusable ways to create content packs and be able to then upload and deploy them. One more thing that I talked about yesterday, I just want to remind you of, is that if you're using Power BI Desktop and you go through the publish mechanism, Power BI Desktop only supports publishing to a personal workspace. It does not support publishing to a group workspace. But the workaround is really simple. And that is, if you're inside of a group workspace, let's go ahead and choose Get Data. Let's go ahead and say Get File. And then I'm going to look for a local file right here. I can just take the PBIX file that I've created with Power BI Desktop, and I can import that directly, which is going to give me the same net effect as if I were able to publish to a group workspace inside there. Now we've added that inside, and now we're able to work with the other things that we've added inside there. Okay, so now you've seen that. Let's go ahead and move back to the slides. Okay, now one last thing we're going to look at. Let's help me move through here, and that's accessing dashboards using mobile devices. And this topic is actually really easy because for the most part it just works. So what we'll see is that Microsoft has created a special type of app that works in iPhones, and they have a separate version for Android and a separate version for iPads, and they work to make sure that they wrote the apps and got them into the Apple Store and got them into the Android Store. I was griping for the whole fall because my Windows 10 Lumina phone wasn't supported, but on the 1st of this year, on January 1st, they now finally released the Windows 10 phone mobile app. And the idea is that you will install one of these apps on your mobile device or your tablet, and then you're going to log in, and then you're going to be able to see things inside there. Now, to show you a demo, what I'm going to do is show you the Power BI app that you can install on a Windows machine. So I went to the Windows Store, I found the Power BI app for Windows, and I downloaded and installed it. Note that when you go to the Microsoft Store, they make you log in with what they call a consumer account, or a Windows Live account is what we used to call them, not a Office 365 or what we call an organizational account. But once you've logged in with your consumer account and you've downloaded and installed, when you fire it up, you can then log in with your organizational account to see things inside there. Okay, now let's go ahead, and what I want to do is demo this. So if I have Microsoft Power BI, so that is the app. we can go ahead, we can fire that thing up, and what you can see here is it's going to be a little bit different than the one you'll get on an iPhone and the one you'll get on an Android and the one you'll get on a Windows phone, but all of them will show you your dashboards front and center. And the idea is that a user should just be able to find a dashboard and to be able to jump into the dashboard and be able to start, figuring out what's inside there. Note that they also give you the ability to navigate between the different groups that you're in. For instance, if I go back to wingtip management, now I can see the two different dashboards that we've added inside there. Now, the one thing that you're really going to need to do with a mobile device is do your testing. For instance, if I look at contributions right here, it's never going to look like this on your iPhone or your Android. You're going to see that they never put two visuals side by side. They're always stacked. And in fact, what's going to happen is that they're going to take, all these different visuals and they're going to make them a lot smaller. Everything you see on this screen is going to look good on a mobile device because I've done the testing inside there. But what you'll find is that other things won't. For instance, if I go and I try to put something like this on my dashboard, this is just not going to render properly on a mobile device. But if you have an iPhone or an Android or a Windows 10 phone and you have your app installed, once you create the dashboard, you can basically just refresh and see exactly what it looks like. So it's a very easy development cycle for you to produce something and see immediately, if it looks good when it renders, in a very small width, as it will on a mobile device inside there. Okay, so at this point, we have now been through the different things that we wanted to discuss in our particular course. When we get to the very end here, I'll give one more shameless plug for our hands-on training. If you liked these 3 days and you want more, please come by and take a look at what we offer inside. Also, I wanted to include an email address. We're trying to really build a good curriculum here with Power BI. We see it's a great growth area, for lots of different companies, whether the company's using it or companies doing consulting or training or developing products around it. So if you have any feedback for me, did you like the lab? Did you like the course? What extra things would you have liked to have seen? Please go ahead and use my email address and send something else to me. Just to also kind of wrap up on the materials, just in case you were not here at the very beginning, the repository at github.com Critical Path Training, which is the Power BI Party Pack, is going to have the zip file with the labs. So if you want to work through some hands-on lab exercises, we have those inside there. Also, we have the slides for all 3 days in both PDF and XPS format. You're going to get a follow-up email today giving you, these details if you're glossing over right now. And then also, you have things like the Wingtip Sales Analytics PBIX file. So this is the file that I've used in Power BI Desktop to basically, do all the demos that you've seen today and yesterday. Okay, so with that, I'm now just going to go and look at the questions that we have inside of the queue, and I'll answer all the questions, and then we'll go ahead and break. If you have any questions, please go ahead and add them inside there. Okay, question from Tony: is their boss Donald Trump? Laugh out loud. Hey, we're not in the business of backing any particular political figure here, so I can't comment on that. Is it possible to aggregate through sites or content on sites like Excel files to create visuals? Well, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to, figure out how to run a query to get those particular values back. So one thing you can definitely do is to use Power BI Desktop, and you can connect to SharePoint lists. You can then import the data from a SharePoint list, and you can do all the data modeling that you want on it. And then you can upload the report and create dashboards. And then what gets to be a little bit tricky if it's on-premise is how do we refresh? And you're going to have to basically install and configure the personal gateway. So whenever we're doing a refresh, it's able to use the personal gateway, as the daemon agent that reaches into your SharePoint farm, pulls the content, and then pushes it, back into the data model that's stored up inside the Power BI service. Okay, outside of lab and materials on GitHub, what's the best resource? So the different resources I've used, is just the Power BI community inside there. If you take a look at the Power BI blog, I would definitely recommend working, spending some time with that. If I go just back to the site right here, and then we drop one of these things down, and community, so community has a pretty good set of distribution lists or of DLs that you can go sign in. You're able to add feedback inside there. People on the Power BI team inside of Microsoft, are constantly updating this. There's a pretty good blog. I would definitely monitor the Power BI blog. So Power BI blog, because they're going to announce, right when something is ready, such as the next version of the Power BI desktop inside there. Okay, so if I go back here, Power BI technical blogs, there's a couple different blogs here that I would definitely monitor on a regular basis. Okay, feedback, having everything on GitHub is awesome. Thank you for that particular feedback. Is DAX the language to learn to leverage all the options of Power BI? No, I would say DAX is a language to learn. As you're using Power BI, you're still going to find times when you need to write SQL. DAX is definitely a great language. I think it will be gaining in popularity compared to SQL and compared to what we have in multidimensional databases, which is MDX. DAX is much easier to get started with, but also, DAX can get equally as confusing, as you get into, a expression where you have to write an expression, and inside you have a table that you've created with calculate table, and inside that you have another calculate table. So once again, DAX can get as deep as you'd like to go. No one that I can think of, short of the two famous guys who are out of Italy, which their names of these two guys, they're right at the tip of my tongue, Marco Russo and Alberto Ferrari. They've written all the good books. Short of those two guys, if anyone claims that I know the DAX language backwards and forward, you can't stump me, I would basically call BS on that. So the language is just very deep. But is it the language? Well, how about Power Query? Power Query has its own new language called M. So if you really want to get good, learning M is another thing. I think today there's a lot more opportunity to write lots of DAX. The tool support doesn't really lend itself to writing M yet. But I think what we'll see is that as Power Query kind of moves away from only for business users into SharePoint or into SQL Server integration services in 2016, they're going to give us support just for writing, M programming languages to do all your Power Query query logic inside there. Okay, so I think I've gone through all the questions right now. I hope everyone has enjoyed our 3-day session. We'd love to see you if you'd like at some point in the future to come back and take some Power BI training with us. And once again, I'm going to leave this email up for just a couple more seconds. I'd love to hear your feedback, about how you like the training and maybe some things about your scenarios and what type of thing to learn. So we need to learn what we need to teach folks like you. So as much feedback as we can get, the better. Thanks everyone for attending this course. I hope you enjoyed it, and hoping to see you virtually or in person sometime in the near future. Cheers.